Simulating radiating coffee along with 40 sensors on the plane. The study says away from mass pollen. Dan, you there? 0.03% particles actually made their way into another passenger's breathing system.
I'm here.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, good. No, you know what? I'm doing it on my my computer,
Okay.
my laptop. So I wanted to. I've been logged on because I want to make sure if I couldn't get on with this way, I would do it on my iPad. Okay, great. Thank you.
Video's turned off.
Yeah, I think it, anyone who wants us to start their video can. But you have no obligation to right now. Larry, is that you?
Yeah, it's me, but I don't know why I don't have a video.
I'm going to promote you to panelist, and you should be able to start your video. Try now.
This one is from the night the cow was killed. Bring it over now. Parents both gone. Stop this.
There you go.
Here we go.
You spent 3 days complaining about it. Just do it. I don't want it.
Unmute. Lucia, unmute.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah.
No, you know what? I'm on my laptop, so I said, let me try it out. All right, seems better.
So
Now I can really see you guys. Hi, Dan. Hi,
Hi.
Dave.
Lucia.
Lucky you.
So we have 4 minutes and 4 members. 3 minutes now.
I saw Alana.
Yeah, she's here.
Yeah. Unmute, Alana, unmute.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. All right.
Larry, I prefer to stay muted until I have something to say, just in case. It just makes it easier for the other people in the meeting to not hear all the extra stuff going
Sure.
on.
Sure.
Hey, Kelly.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Hey, Alana.
Hello, hello.
How are you, Alana?
I'm good. Thank you. You know, just getting tired of this whole pandemic like everybody else. But what are you going to
Yeah.
do? Anybody there not tired of it?
Hmm.
I got
Are you-
treated. My husband's a school teacher, so he was home with the kids all spring. But this fall, he got called back. All the teachers had to go back into school. So it's kind of like I'm experiencing it for the first time. I'm feeling kind of worn out. I mean, not my kids are so easy. It's just that it's hard working from home, you know. You
Yeah.
don't have everything you need. It's exhausting. I think it's exhausting.
Oh, I just got a message from Shannon 3 minutes late on her way. And that message was 2 minutes ago. So 1 more minute.
You had the meeting last night, Kelly? Or was it Monday? When did you have the meeting? The
We
Board
had
of
the meeting.
Trustees?
We had the meeting on Tuesday because of
Oh,
the
Tuesday.
Columbus Day holiday.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I saw that the dog park or the dogs on leash are allowed. That's fantastic. It's a great first step.
I'm so happy.
I mean, it seems like such a silly thing, like to be
I know.
sitting watching a baseball game and your beautiful dog is stuck inside instead of sitting next to you. It was past its time. I'm so happy to see that happen.
Well, I just hope the dog owners are on their best behavior.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Good luck with that. We go down there all the time and you see people with their dogs running all over the place.
They're off leash.
Well, you know, that is just not okay. And David, are you seeing them on the Rushmore section?
Rushmore section. Well, I've seen it there. I see it on the baseball field, the soccer field.
Yeah. It just always surprises me when I see people over on Rushmore with their dogs off leash because there are busy streets right there. I mean,
Yeah,
and your
right.
dog could get distracted by a squirrel and it's just really, it's a dangerous place to be off leash. I don't understand it.
Well, there's the
I
meeting we
watched-
just
I
came
watched
from was
one black
yeah.
dog
dog park, about dog
to
parks.
run almost the entire length of the Rushmore section from the intersection with the post road all the way up to when you start to go past the playground there,
Wow.
along the wall.
Kelly, let me ask you, is there a reason why you guys didn't consider off leash at the beach? Is that something that was discussed?
It was not discussed.
Oh, really?
There is no discussion of doing anything off leash except in like a dedicated dog park.
Okay.
We don't allow dogs on the beach, period, here.
Uh-huh. Is there a reason? Just because they don't clean up, or?
I think it's the cleanup. It's the, it's not the biggest beach.
Uh-huh.
And it's just, people love that beach and with their kids, it's just a very popular place. And so once you start letting dogs pee all over the place, it
Yeah,
just
okay.
gets messy.
Yeah, yeah.
That's nice.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense, actually.
Yeah. I'd love to get a dedicated dog park somewhere.
I know. Somebody posted about that Taylor Lane site.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, dogs dig. And if there's like a cap on that land, how deep is that cap?
36 inches.
36?
So that'd be a pretty aggressive big dog. with
Yeah.
long-
Yeah.
No, we were just talking about that, and we talked about Taylor's Lane a little bit on Tuesday night, actually.
Yeah. What kind of toxic substance was it? Do you know?
It was just leachate. I mean, but the cap's there. It's working as designed.
Uh-huh.
We've already got the state to reclass the site to like the lowest level it can be, and we're just working on closing it out right now, and hopefully that will be done by the end of the year.
Okay, that's
So,
good.
Hi, folks. Sorry for the delay.
Hey, hello, our fearless leader.
In her garage, as usual. So, for those who join me on other random Zoom meetings, this is my office at night.
I think we have a forum now, so I can start the meeting on
Please do.
on YouTube. Yes, I think for sure.
Let me just pull up the agenda. I'm not ignoring you all, I promise. Are we ready, Dan?
For some reason, it's not. Let me try one more time, see if this works. So we're streaming on the Zoom, but for some reason it's not translating over to YouTube, but we're still satisfied what we need to satisfy in terms of the meetings.
Meeting requirements. Okay.
So
Okay.
if this works, it works. I don't know why it's not working.
Okay. Well, shall we proceed?
Okay, you can. Worst comes to worst, we'll just, when we get the Zoom video, we'll upload it to YouTube.
Right,
Hey,
right,
Dan,
right.
just for a heads up, I see that Karen is an attendee.
Okay,
Can we promote her?
absolutely.
Thanks. I think she probably just used the wrong link to
There
get
she
in.
is. There she is.
There she is.
Oh, there she went.
Not my fault.
This is hard. This is just hard. Everything is hard.
And the elevated level of Zoom stress. Don't forget, folks.
That's right.
Okay, let's try one more time.
I tell you what, while you try one more thing for 20 seconds, I'm just going to get my printed back up so I have it to refer to, so I don't have to keep flipping back and forth between looking at you lovely people and looking at my Gmail, which I feel is very rude. So if you'll bear with me for 20 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
So just two pieces of housekeeping item. On Tuesday night, the board adopted the resolutions to lower the speed limit on Fenimore to 25 miles per hour.
Hey, Mazel Tov.
Establish that handicap parking space on Center Avenue.
That's
Now-
very exciting.
I thought that during the meeting that I emailed all of you with that news, but no one replied. So I think it didn't go through somehow. Once again, we're just.
If a tree falls.
Yeah. I know someone would have replied. Great
What was
news.
that? Dan, where was that? What was that one again?
Fenimore.
Fenimore, which we previously were led to believe might be a county road, in fact.
And Prospect, right?
No, just Fenimore Road itself, right?
But 25 mile an hour, 25 mile an hour in Fenimore.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yep, okay, got it.
And the handicap spot on Center.
Oh, perfect,
Yeah.
great.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Great, great.
Sometimes.
Now, when will it get done? The
Sometimes.
handicap?
I'll work with Tony on that. We really need to get that done sooner rather than later because the temperature is only going to get colder.
Right,
And you got to make sure you have several good days of 40-degree and above temperatures.
yeah, it's supposed to be a very bad winter also.
Is that right?
Yep,
Oh, I just don't know how much more of this bad stuff I can take.
Mm.
It's a test.
It is a test for sure.
All right. If everybody's comfortable, we'll go ahead and get started. We've got just two new items of new business. The first
is
of
Karen, I'm sorry, excuse me, is Karen here?
She
I don't
did not.
I-
She did not come back in. So
She
Okay,
just
so-
texted me and said she's having trouble. I just sent her the link, so we'll see if she can figure it out.
Okay.
Okay.
And no village, and no police department either?
No,
yeah, no VMPD's here.
Yeah.
VM.
They are?
we're here by-
Uh-huh.
Department's here.
Hi, who's that?
Gaglione,
Can you spell your last name, please?
Gaglione, and it's a police officer.
Yes.
Thank you, officer, for coming.
Thank you, officer. And Andy's
Welcome.
not here, right?
That's correct.
Andy, okay.
And Officer Gaglione, if you were in my office, my boss would shame you into putting your camera on.
I'm on the phone, not on a computer. We don't have cameras on our computers.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm sure you look great.
Got my uniform already.
You're here, that's what counts.
And before you start talking about the items, need a motion to open the meeting and second and vote.
Anyone?
I'll motion.
I'll second it. All right. All
All
those in
right.
favor of starting the meeting?
Aye.
Salud. All right, let's do it. Okay, so first up on new business, we have a request at 528 Rockland Avenue. The incident is described as follows: the driveway at our home address, extremely dangerous. My wife and I have almost been hit by oncoming cars because of a blind spot at the end of our driveway. Neither oncoming traffic nor people leaving our driveway can see as cars leave. Fearful of the consequences if nothing is done, we have a newborn son, and all I can think of is a crash with him in the car. So what they are asking for is a no parking sign for at least one car closest to our driveway to clear some of the visibility issues, keeping oncoming cars, exiting vehicles, and pedestrians safe from. And, you know, the gentleman actually included pictures in his incident report. So 528 Rockland Ave. Off the top of your heads, I guess I would ask, is anyone familiar with that area of Rockland Ave?
We don't have a cross street, right? They didn't give you a cross street.
No, they're just along Rockland Ave, and apparently it looks...
up on Google Maps. It's right before you get to Waverly.
Okay, so very close to that intersection.
I go by there all the time. I walked there the other day because I walked over to the Cablevision place.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah, no, it looks like it, you know, from the center picture I'm looking at right here, it looks like parking is allowed right up to the very point of exit from their driveway, you know, which would be a typical street parking situation, right? As long as you're not blocking a driveway or a side street or, you know, parking lot entrance or something like that. But it, you know, from, again, looking at the pictures, it's a little bit hard to tell, but it looks like the driveway is pretty deep and flat. And so I can certainly see how, like, pulling a car out of there, you know, if you had cars flanking either side of it, it would make it tough. You'd really have to nose out pretty carefully. So I guess there's a couple of things. You know, it looks like they're looking for just one car length, you know, adjacent to the entrance to their driveway to be blocked off as no parking. Question for Dan. I mean, is that something that, you know, we've done in other locations in the village where folks have had trouble just kind of like navigating, getting in and out of their driveways?
Well, I mean, if there's a visual obstruction, I think it's, you know, a perfectly reasonable approach to eliminate one or two parking spaces so that, you know, people can see.
Yep.
Both the motorists on the road and the residents who are pulling out of their driveways.
Right.
You know,
So, but I'm sorry, Dan, were you done?
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, is this not something we have all over the village? And we
Yeah,
have been
that's
one
kind
of
of
the
why.
last year. So what are we going to do? We're going to start taking out parking spaces on either side of people's driveways?
Well, I mean, typically the request will come from the resident. You know, if you conduct site visits, you'll have an opportunity to see what it actually looks like. You know, having, you know, done traffic safety for a while, you know, it's, you know, and people tend to be very, you know, obviously very protective of their homes, their families. Yeah, that's the call that you know, you have to look at, is whether or not is it an actual visual obstruction or not.
Right.
And I mean, I think you said you took a walk out there. Did you were able to form an opinion on what you thought of the layout?
You know, it's to my eye, there's nothing unusual here that would warrant removing a parking space.
Yeah, I mean,
And the cost of a sign there. It's,
Right.
Yeah.
what happens in a semi-urban.
It's not on a curve or anything like that.
I mean, if another alternative is hidden driveway signs. I mean, you see that pretty frequently if there's, a curve in the road. Obviously I don't know if it's still hidden when is it hidden because of vehicle, or is it hidden because there is a curve in the roadway that does make it, or some other obstruction that makes it difficult to see.
Yeah.
That's-
From the
lot of-
pictures that I'm looking at here, it looks like it's a straightaway. I mean, it does not look like it's situated on a sharp turn or a curve. It doesn't look like there's any real like tree growth or hedges or anything like that to complicate the issue. But yeah, I mean, I think, sort of like the English and park thing, it's hard to gauge just based on pictures. I think it might warrant, at least the village going or one of us going out and paying a visit and just kind of seeing what it looks like. When we held the Prospect Avenue walking assessment a couple of weeks ago now, one of the participants on my walking pod was saying, it's just very disturbing that I have to like creep out in order to be able to see oncoming traffic, and what, Matt Carmody, oh, there we are. Thank you, David. Our traffic safety engineering consultant shared is like, actually, that's a good thing. You want people in their vehicles to be creeping. You want them to kind of like take their time nudging out and looking both ways and making sure that things are all clear. So 528 is where the pin drop is. Can everyone see this that David's sharing? Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like it's complicated by a curve.
And one of the things I've mentioned, once or twice, Shannon, is kind of the modern, just echoing what Matt said.
Yeah.
Kind of the modern theory of traffic control or the management of speed is to create the appearance of stuff that will make people slow down.
Slow down. Yep.
It's
crowded streets. Yep.
A lot of traffic safety it's more psychological in nature than it is engineering sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Shannon, I have a question because this comes up so frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've often discussed is that it's often the difference between a car parked there and an SUV parked there. The SUVs being so much taller that they really create more of an obstruction visually to than cars do. And I just wonder if at the high level that you're at, is there any discussion of distinguishing between cars and SUVs so that you could park a car there but not an SUV, or not like a box truck, or not because there's a difference.
So you've first of all hit on a very, very important data point in our national fatality picture, particularly where pedestrians are involved. And that is that, the overwhelming uptick in pedestrian injury and fatal crashes over the past, 8 to 10 years has involved SUVs. They're just not, they're engineered to protect the occupants of the vehicle, which is great, no problem with that. But they're terrible when it comes to potential conflicts with bicycles or pedestrians or anything like that. The challenge is if the village were to throw up a sign, for instance, that said like compact cars only, because this is such a wide open space, just fairly typical village local roadway, I think enforcement would be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And I think usually where you see, and even compact car only parking is something you just don't see nowadays.
Right.
But usually that's usually in an off-street scenario, and compact car parking is usually what they'll violate you for is parking outside the lines of the parking space. Right. So you'll see compact spaces are complete rectangles that the car has to fit within. The other item is an SUV is still registered as a passenger vehicle. I don't know how you can delineate between different types of passenger vehicles. That's where it gets a little tricky, I think.
Right. Right.
And I'm having the same problem getting onto, coming out of the side street, going onto Melbourne. When I make the left-hand turn, I'm sorry, North Barry, it's like so bad on both ends. I can't see. I have to pull in the middle of the street
Before you
to
can
make a
actually see.
left-hand turn.
Yeah.
But and this is going to sound a little strange, but sometimes the best indicator that there is a real problem is crash data.
Hmm.
You know, and this goes back to when you're creeping, when you're going slower, you're paying more attention, you're less likely to be in an accident. If there are real issues, the crash data will bear that out. That's why I bring up the concept of the always stop sign. We try to use the manual of uniform traffic control devices when making decisions, and I think the warrant that's in the MUTCD that we call it is 5 accidents in a 12-month period. Sorry, 5 crashes in a 12-month period.
Thank you, Dan.
You know what? I'm just going to speak up for that resident. It is really hard to come to the village and ask to advocate for the safety of your family. This is somebody with a newborn baby who is having anxiety every time they're pulling out of their driveway.
Sure.
I just feel like we are too quick to knock things down, and I will not vote against this until everybody has gone to the site. I mean, if that person is backing out, and it feels like they're going to get hit with a newborn baby in the car, I don't even want to be on this committee if we're not going to take a look. I mean, really, who are they competing? I'm talking. Let me just finish. Who are they competing with for those spots? I mean, if you look at the map, you're gonna if you give them a little bit of edge, to the curve, just so the person has a chance to come out. Who are they taking the spot away from, themselves or their next door neighbor? This is it's a very industrial area. I'm sorry, but I'm going to side with the resident.
Why can't we move this space back a little?
Well, that's what they've requested. I mean, basically,
Yeah.
Just,
I think in looking at the pictures they provided, there were about 2 spaces between their driveway and the driveway of their next door neighbor.
Right.
Is that accurate?
Actually, in the one center picture on
There's 3.
on the form,
There's
there are
3.
3. Yeah, parked right in front of their house.
Are they at the meeting tonight? Is anybody here from?
Looks like there's a
there?
couple of.
Yeah.
It's not, the people
attendees.
who are attending are not this last name Sullivan, so I don't know.
Hard to know.
Do we know if they're owners or renters?
I don't know that.
I don't know. I don't know
I don't know
how
that
relevant that
matters.
is in the discussion.
Yeah. I mean, and let me just throw a couple things out there. I mean, to Alana's point, you're absolutely right. I mean, we don't want any village resident, whether they're in their car, on their feet, on their bike, or whatever, to feel unsafe traveling on the roadways. That's the whole purpose of the Vision Zero initiative. And yes, we follow the data, and we follow what the crash data is telling us in terms of prioritization of the limited resources that the village has. But we definitely want, for folks to feel that the streets are safe. I think there's a couple of easy things that we can certainly do right off the bat. I think, first of all, paying a visit to, Rushmore, or Rockland rather, to this area, and just kind of getting that observational feel for what the confounding circumstances might be that makes it so difficult for this, resident to feel okay about pulling out their driveway. And whether we can, back some of those spaces up a little bit just with some simple striping or something like that without having to invest in signs might be an option. But I think another real opportunity here is for us to, gather the crash data for that stretch of Rockland Avenue. I mean, is there, are there a large number of collisions that are occurring, with people coming out of their driveways and just either smacking into vehicles that are coming down the roadway or vice versa? I think that would be, data speaks volumes, right? I mean, and yeah, it's certainly, everybody's got to be more cautious, and we know, and this is another really important point to remember, that, particularly during the pandemic over the past not quite a year, the number of excessive speed and aggressive driving crashes that are occurring nationwide are just off the charts.
Are they really?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I remember at the beginning, everyone was off the road, and so everything was so safe. And now people are just, I mean, we see
People-
it frankly in the emails that come
Right.
from the village.
People
are
don't
really-
people don't take public anymore because of COVID.
Yeah.
So they're all in their cars. They're stressed out. They're freaked. You know, we're all in a low level state of shared trauma.
Yeah.
Right? We're surviving a global pandemic. So they get behind the wheel, and that's where the aggressions come out and the anxiety comes out. So I mean, I do think it's certainly worthwhile to look at the crash data and to pay a visit and just kind of, you know, as we know these little, whether it's a mini or a maxi assessment, as we know they do, you know, give us those eyes and ears for what it feels like on that street. So,
Thing now?
I'll talk to the chief. I'll see what type of accident data. There might be more accident data for the intersections as opposed to,
just the corridor. Yeah.
the corridor. But I'll see what type of information they have.
That, you know
Okay.
what, having lived in in this area most of my life, it's a difficult block to begin with. You have the curve and the height coming off the railroad bridge. There are no sidewalks on that block, so you find school children walking in the middle of the street to all the high school kids, because the high school is only 2 blocks away. So you always find high school kids walking in the street. There's parking on both sides of the street, and that really restricts movement also in these streets. So it's a difficult block to begin with. I've been using it all my life, so
Right.
I know it, but I don't know what the solution is.
Can you cut the curb back a little?
I really want to take a look.
Rockland, it's kind of weird because there's some, I know especially by the railroad bridge, that portion of Rockland Avenue was moved. So if you're traveling south on Rockland Avenue, before you hit the railroad bridge, you'll see this little, looks like an alleyway. That is actually the old Rockland Avenue, which is still public.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
the
David.
Rockland Avenue, which traveled through some gentleman's property by the bridge as well. It's
At the bottom of your screen.
it's a little kooky, the layout of Rockland Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically where you can see it right where the mouse is,
Yep.
where the bridge is. You see that little alleyway where it looks like cars are parked. That's the actual former Rockland Avenue when
Okay.
before the railroad put the bridge in.
Hey, Dan, a dumb question. Can you cut the curb back a little?
I'm not sure. That's more of an engineering question, and also a question as to what property we own, what right of way
Okay.
there is out there.
Yeah, the right.
Because like I said, the right of way situation is it's a little weird out there because of
Right.
things that happened 80, 90 years ago.
Okay.
Well, I'd throw this out to everybody and see what you think. I've actually got a little bit of time over the weekend coming to ride my bike up there. So I'm happy to go pay the place a visit and just take a look. Sunday afternoon, for instance, and kind of get a bead on what it feels like to be near that driveway and everything, just in terms of sheer visibility.
Yeah, to Larry's point though, it is adjacent to an industrial area.
Yep.
Which is going to be more heavily populated during the weekday hours as opposed to the weekend hours. So
Sure. Okay. Outright. Good point. And experiential is good. So if we can do that during, okay. Yep.
And Dan, are you going to see if you can get some data information from the chief?
The crash
yeah,
data. Yeah.
I will email them after this meeting. And let me promote Karen to panelist again.
Ah, she's back. Thank you, Dan, for noticing that.
Oh, didn't
Aaron.
email you that he was having
Yeah, well, that was yesterday, and I don't know if that's been solved yet, but I can certainly ask him to add it to his list of items to follow up with some information on.
So is Karen back? Oh, there she is. Okay.
She is. No sound, no video, but she's here.
She's lurking.
Hello. I'm so
I asked her to unmute and
Hi.
asked her to start. Video.
Hey, Karen.
Very good.
Technical difficulties, sorry.
No worries. It happens.
Oh,
All right. So and
how are
I
you? Sorry,
please-
go ahead.
good to see you.
Or
Bear
not.
with me,
You
folks.
too.
Our feedback loop for the resident is, I know we devised a clever little kind of rubric where, we'd get back to them. I'm happy to take that on. I mean, shoot them a quick note and let them know, that we've got kind of a two-step, we're going to pay the place a visit and that we're going to collect some crash data and just take a look. But, that sadly, this is a complaint that we hear all too often, just from a very cozy, crowded village with lots of local roadways with street parking on both sides of the street. So we're going to do what we can, but that we'll certainly take these two immediate first steps.
Okay, can I just do a little bit of housekeeping? I see that we have 2 attendees at tonight's meeting, Lisa and Tom. And I just want to make sure if there's something they want to comment on, that they raise their hand so that we know that they'd like to say something. Okay, that's it. Sorry, Shannon.
No worries.
Oh, we have a hand raised already.
Okay. Lisa talk, just unmute yourself and you should be able to, there you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Lisa.
Okay, good. Hi, I'm Lisa. I just wanted to speak up because we have exactly the same issue where we live on Prospect on the corner of Maple.
Oh, we just recently did a walking safety assessment of your
I
area.
know, and unfortunately I missed that, and
Oh.
I needed to be there, but it's an interesting combination of issues because we're on the side of the street with parking, and we're also on that corner, and we're the first driveway on that corner, and cars kind of come to a rolling stop and whip around the corner, and it's virtually impossible to get in and out of our driveway. And we've been in this house for 5 years. I've had a few close calls, but I now only back into the driveway, which means I can only approach it from one side of the street. And I think I'm a good driver, but it's really dangerous. And I think that, if the parking doesn't get moved to the other side of the street, I don't know where that stands. At the very least, I think the 2 spots that are on the one side, just before our driveway, it would be really helpful if there were no cars there, because oftentimes there are SUVs or working vehicles on both sides and you can't see a thing.
Right. No, certainly appreciate that.
Yeah.
I thought we voted on this.
Did you
No,
vote on that?
this intersection, I believe, resulted in the highly visible crosswalks that you see at the corner. Yep, at the corner of Prospect and Maple, and if it gives you any kind of comfort, Lisa, when we did the WSA a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
That intersection as compared to, for instance, the intersection of Prospect and Mount Pleasant, or God forbid, the intersection of Prospect and Fenimore, was not only felt a whole heck of a lot safer for the pedestrians, and we observed a couple of families with, kids in strollers and stuff crossing safely, but those highly visible crosswalks are doing a really good job at slowing the traffic down. So, congratulations to whoever's wise decision it was to put those in.
Okay, I think that would solve part of the problem, but for us personally, I haven't noticed it being a lot safer and a lot more visible for us to getting
coming in and out of your driveway. Yeah.
I understand the Fenimore Prospect thing. That's
oh my God, that was wild. That was wild. But one of the,
where we talked about moving the parking from one side of the street to the other.
It is. This is the street.
And this has happened, I guess back and forth, multiple times over the course of the past decade or so.
Right. Okay.
You know, and please don't misunderstand. I mean, we're not totally being dismissive. I think, you know, part of the larger issue is that cars that speed along these local roadways are themselves residents. They know where they can get away with it. They know how to circumvent the major roads like Fenimore, Boston Post Road, Mamaroneck Avenue. They know the cut-throughs, right? I mean, and in fact, you see right now there's a major community-driven campaign in Washingtonville, you know, not your cut-through neighborhood. You know, so unfortunately, you know, it's the old adage, I've seen the enemy and he is me, you know, like the folks who are, you know, making it such an unsafe and hazardous kind of travel zone in our local roadways are the people who live here because they know they can and they know how to get around it.
Right.
So one of the goals of our Villages Vision Zero initiative is to, you know, through a very concerted effort of the engineering side, you know, again, with the limited resources that they have, working with enforcement, working with concerned residents like yourself, the traffic commission, you know, people who want to really get on board with this, is to make it just socially unacceptable to speed through this village. You know, and put together kind of a massive outreach education media campaign where, you know, we get champions embedded on every corridor in every neighborhood and, you know, do that kind of outreach. I mean, it's, you know, the challenge of behavioral change on a local roadway where it's already crowded and narrow and uncomfortable to speed, and yet somebody feels comfortable doing it anyway, is they got to be shamed out of it. You know, they got to be literally shamed out of it. So
Well, I hope that happens before there's an accident.
Sure, no, absolutely.
I feel like it's extremely tricky.
Yep.
And I mean, because we've got all of the elements of Prospect Avenue changing kind of directionally and then being on that corner. And I think, I don't know where the status is of the parking on that street, but if it doesn't get changed, at the very least, I think it should be compact cars only, those first two spots. Because I cannot see a thing getting in and out.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know, Lisa, if you were around when we were just talking about this other neighbor. Okay.
Yeah, I was part of it.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, I mean, certainly for the purposes of Mr. Sullivan, I think we've got a 2-point plan to follow up with his request. Lisa, I know, you know, you weren't actually on the Prospect walking safety assessment, but I assure you that, you know, that corridor was pretty thoroughly scrubbed. We had 4 separate walking pods.
Okay.
You know, largely looking at, I will say that, you know, with the Vision Zero initiative, you know, the village is very much prioritizing not just corridors where there's like the most egregious number of crashes or near misses or something like that, but also places where it is, you know, particularly confounding or dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists, because the most serious crashes tend to involve people outside their cars.
Okay.
Yeah. But thank you so much for turning up, and your voice matters, I promise. Can I, in fact, if we can get your email address, Lisa, can we include you with the Prospect Avenue report? Okay, that'd be great.
Yes, please, yes.
Cool.
Do you want it right now?
Lucia, can you grab that if she gives it to us?
Sure.
Lisa,
Awesome.
if you want, if you want to email it to me, I'll send it. If you don't want to like speak it publicly.
Oh, true, right? Because
Yeah, sure,
we're on YouTube. I forgot about that.
If you'd rather email it to me,
I will do that.
Okay, my email is kwenstrup, KWENSTRUP, like Paul, at VOMNY.org.
.org. Okay.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Shannon, can we get back to the 528 Rockland? You're going to contact the resident, correct?
I'll shoot him an email. Absolutely, Lucia.
Okay.
Let him know that.
And
that
now, this lady, Lisa, just don't do anything with her? Just,
she was a walk-up, and it sounds like we'll send her a copy of the Prospect Avenue
okay, so I'm not gonna
walking
worry.
safety
Okay,
assessment. Yeah, absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. And I was on fire this past week, man. I cranked one of those out in no time. So we'll see what happens with this one. All right. Moving right along, the other piece of new business that we have tonight is the stop sign requested for Rushmore and Stiles Avenue. And actually, Dan, I saw that you got out in front of this. If you want to just give the rest of the commission a quick update on what you looked at.
Well, I tried to get in front. I asked the police chief if he could get me the accident data. And I think they're having some issues with the system over at the PD, so I don't have that information right now.
Right,
But
tracks this
again,
down.
so I wanted to try and get some data for the traffic commission to take a look at in the context of this request.
Okay.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't have that. I don't know if you want to discuss it now or wait until I do have the data. Whatever the commission's prerogative is.
I think we should wait until we know what's going on. That's
Exactly.
my opinion.
Exactly. No, I think that's a great point. I'll just read aloud what I have, the PDF version of the residents incident report. Turning in and out of Stiles and Rushmore is unsafe out of Stiles, and to make a left on Rushmore, there's no visibility, more heavy fast traffic. Okay. There are stops on other streets. Sorry, the handwriting with the change. So inconsistent drivers usually don't see Stiles Avenue. Stop sign at Rushmore and Stiles. They live right on the corner and have children. Okay, cool. So yeah, the crash data and perhaps much like Mr. Sullivan's request, this is something that I ought to go take a look at. So Rushmore is very close to where I live. Stiles is just, I'm assuming, one of the little apartment entry roadways.
It's not an apartment entry. It's a just single family homes
Okay.
entry. But yeah, it's between Claflin and Rushmore.
Gotcha. Okay.
I also did ask the building department to send code enforcement officers out there to see if there are any unkempt flora and fauna which could actually.
Excellent.
So I didn't hear back on that one.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan. And before we kind of move into our next phase of old business and stuff like that, one of the things that I promised to do via email, and I happened to have a good conversation with Matt Carmody earlier today, in fact, not on the village's bill, I promise, Dan. But we are putting together just kind of a very succinct but information-packed tutorial that we want to certainly preview with the rest of the Traffic Commission, but that might in fact be really helpful to, if we can put it together as like a voiced over presentation or something like that to post on the Traffic Commission's website. Just, debunking some of the myths of traffic safety. If you had to become a traffic safety specialist in 1 hour or less, right? What are, and I think, Dan, you alluded to it earlier, what are some of the, common sort of misbeliefs about, what makes a roadway safer in terms of, genuinely reducing crash risk and stuff like that. And I think, if everybody here felt really good about it and felt like this is something that we could use to educate our neighbors and friends and other residents, it might help us to address some of the kind of recurring themes that we see, so and Matt is terrific. I mean, he's really put a lot of thought into this for a couple of municipalities over in Rockland County who had embarked on Complete Streets initiatives. So I think it'll mesh really well with our Vision Zero initiative, and I think it'll be something that not only sort of we can use internally as a refresher for the Traffic Commission, but also something that we can use to help educate our neighbors. So I'm hoping that we can schedule maybe a separate hour, in addition to next month's traffic commission, or, if we can, I don't know, piggyback on top. I know I love 60-minute meetings, but if there's a way that we can find some time for you guys to just, participate and give your feedback and help make it a really good product so that, we can help educate our neighbors as well. I think it'd
Thank
be
you. That does sound great.
cool. Okay, great. All right. I think that was it. 2 pieces of new business.
Do we have anybody that needs to address
Any
us?
other attendees?
Nope, no other attendees. We have 0 now.
It shows chat on mine too. What does that mean?
Well, there's a chat
Oh,
function.
David was chatting to all of them, saying that he saw 2
Oh,
attendees.
okay.
That's it.
Okay, okay. Good.
Right. And Karen is being a pedestrian.
Yeah, I am.
Awesome. Awesome. Stay safe.
Oh my gosh, so frustrating. Oh well, that's okay. It's just the least of my worries in life right now.
Okay. Good.
Are you outside?
It's
Oh,
beautiful
It's not
out.
what you think. It's not what you think. I had to do a run at the airport, but I'm making him drive the car while I do this.
Oh, okay.
Oh well.
All right.
Last minute situation.
So
Okay.
turning to old business, the walking assessment report on English Park, North Wagner, and Franklin has been submitted.
Oh, back.
Maybe you want to mute yourself, Karen, for just a minute. Yes, has been submitted. We've had some follow-up correspondence with one of the residents, Christy Luciano, who has been a terrific, nudger of making sure this stuff is getting done. But Dan, you and Jerry and the others, it's delivered with respectfully into your laps at this point. So we'll take it from there. Is there anything else business-wise, like we?
On the Baronic Avenue pedestrian traffic improvements. So just a couple items. I know that I've already.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry, Dan, I'm sorry. So what are we doing with this walking this, just take it off now? Is it done with you guys?
It's submitted. The village leadership has it now.
So should I take it off or just leave it on?
I guess it remains like we've got some sort of rubric for like following up with the village every so often.
Okay, all right.
Hey,
Then I'll
which
leave it on.
recommendations are you guys gonna pursue? But yeah, for that matter, Lucia, it's a good point. We've got a handful of walking assessment reports that are out there and posted on the website, and I know and this will get back to that whole sort of like November education briefing that we want to put together. Jerry at one point gave me a wonderful sort of breakdown of like recommendations from assessment reports that you guys have done, and here's what's actually happening or happened because of them. And I know it's time consuming for him to have to go sift through all the recommendations and type up like all the actions that have occurred because of them, or are at least planned to occur because of them. But that it might be good, and Dan, I hate to load more on your plate, but if you or Jerry could just kind of give the commission an overall idea of how those recommendations translate into implementation, I think that would be really cool.
Okay.
So you want me to leave it on? I'll leave it on then for next month?
Yeah, maybe not specifically this particular assessment report, but just like an agenda item for the traffic commission's education piece that we're putting together. Like, how do assessment reports become action?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Cool. Because it certainly is a question that we ask ourselves and that people are asking us all the time.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, Dan, you were talking about Mamaroneck Ave?
Oh, I can go back to Fenimore Road Prospect.
Yep.
I'm not sure what was brought up, what was discussed about Monroe Avenue. That doesn't.
I think that was just part of the recent walking safety assessment, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yep.
Yeah. But, as far as Fenimore and Prospect, Matt Carney made a suggestion about a specific capital project.
Yep.
I believe it's in our capital budget.
Good.
We're currently in the process of reviewing the budget to identify priorities. I can certainly try and make this a priority. Grant funding for projects of this nature, just grant funding in general is a lot harder to find nowadays.
I know.
A lot of the major grant programs have been either suspended or just wallowing in the ether.
No, and Matt participated in the Prospect WSA, and I'll just reiterate what he said. I mean, the sad truth is, in this case, it is genuinely an infrastructure problem. I mean, it's just, there's no way you're gonna, message or enforce your way out of this one. It is a really hairy and challenging and high-speed road for pedestrians to cross, and there's opportunities to make that safer, but it's going to require a pretty big capital investment. So
yeah. I think it's physical infrastructure in the roadway, that's really the only way to solve it. There's no other way to do it.
The 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, though, will help.
It will help, but
for sure.
It's too close to Palmer Avenue with another traffic light there.
Yep.
It would be a nightmare to have that type of traffic situation. On Baronic Avenue pedestrian traffic improvements, we did get CDBG funding for kind of phase one of the improvements that were recommended at the initial walking safety assessment. We've also been discussing the Grand Street and Baronic Avenue intersection and seeing if we can cajole the county to also including something in their project for next year when they resurface Baronic Avenue. I need to send a letter to county executive, the commissioner of DPW, and our former village engineer, who's one of the deputy commissioners at DPW now.
Perniny's there?
Yeah, he took it. He's one of the he's a deputy commissioner at county DPW.
Oh, fantastic!
He might be actively involved in the Baronic Avenue resurfacing project.
Hey, remember your roots.
We also, one of the things that is included, which we've discussed, is the moving the crosswalk on Waverly Avenue from the north side of the intersection to the south side.
Yep.
And it's actually talk about something being borne out by data. What we determined was it's something like a 5 or 6 to 1 different ratio of cars making the left-hand turn off Waverly onto Baronic and the right-hand turn.
Exactly.
We said it makes no sense to have a crosswalk directly in the path of people making turns into the crosswalk. And thankfully, the county agreed with us. We showed them the data, and they're going to include that as part of the project, which is a major benefit for us.
That is great news. That is really great news. And yeah, remember County Executive Latimer was here on one of our traffic commission meetings, a couple months ago, right?
Yeah.
And said, anything you need.
Yeah, and after he was elected, he came to a traffic safety commission and said, anything you need. And he said, well, there's this one thing. And thankfully, he's helped to make that happen.
Cool. Very cool. That's
okay.
great.
I'm sorry, Dan, can you go back to number 2? So what are we doing with that?
I'm gonna, we're
Should I leave it on for next month?
Well, that was included in the Prospect Avenue
Right.
WSA that we just did. Right. So, I mean, until the report is developed and submitted,
I'll leave it on. Okay.
Sure.
There is a pre-existing recommendation aside from the WSA about that intersection. I believe we do have a capital budget request for that. One of the things that we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is evaluating and prioritizing our capital budget. Again, I mean, this is a different economic world than
Yeah.
We were in a year ago, and we took it pretty seriously. But I think something like this, we can probably establish as a higher priority than some of the other items in the capital budget. So that's where we stand with the Fenimore Prospect intersection. I think the Fenimore Monroe is something a little bit separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked about Mamaroneck Avenue. Old business item number 4 was just the request for a stop sign at South Berry and Guion Drive. And last month, it looks like VMPD talked about setting up a speed trailer to collect additional data and having a bit of enforcement put on site. Officer, I'm so sorry to put you on the spot, but do you know whether that actually occurred over the past month?
I would have to send Lieutenant Deruza an email. That's something that they handle. I ride the bike, not the traffic unit, so the traffic unit would have better information than I would.
I believe Lieutenant Deruza reported on this at the last meeting.
Oh, did she? Okay.
Yeah, I think she said that, was it the 85th percentile of speed?
Right.
Was 27 miles per hour.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Does that affect, does that sound familiar to everyone else?
It does.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I thought Karen
Yes.
was, yeah.
I
and
did
they-
handle it.
they were gonna-
And
they were-
that's what it was.
Yeah, they were gonna leave it there another month.
They
Okay.
didn't. They took it. It's gone. It's been gone. Nope.
Yeah.
They took it.
They took it. So,
Took it at
mean-
least a few weeks back, at least 3 weeks, right after that meeting.
but I thought they agreed to put it back.
It wasn't there.
Mm.
It was, they never put it back.
I
So
don't know when, and I don't know exactly the date that happened, but while it was there, that was the data, but it was removed.
Right, but then I have that they were gonna turn the lights off to collect additional data and have the
Right.
police enforce.
Yeah, I know.
So it was never done?
Well, I mean,
Sounds like maybe we need to hear from Lieutenant Deruza and find out
Right.
whether they actually had some enforcement out there.
Okay, we'll leave it on then.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid if the 85th percentile was 27 miles per hour,
yeah.
not much we can do to.
It's just what you said.
Well,
It's residents
Shannon,
that
it wasn't-
know when they can get away with it, they
Yep.
will.
Yep.
It's exactly how you put it. And honestly, Shannon, if you could come up with, I mean, there's got to
Tag
be
them.
some social consciousness where there's some sort of shame involved. I mean, I don't want to be the morality police here, but
No.
I mean, I live in that community, and listen, I'm not exactly perfect in my life. I've never not speeded, but it's about the fact that we live in a community. We know that this is deadly. Speed kills. You're in a car. This is a walking community, specifically mine. I live in a
Yep.
European area of Mamaroneck.
Yep.
People come from Europe specifically to be in Shore Acres. Why? Because it's a walking community. It's near the water. So when people have to leave their countries and they come into New York, they want to be in this community because it's known as a walking community.
Yep.
And
I know,
all of
Karen.
Mamaroneck is, but specifically that one. And so when you have kids, dogs, older people walking constantly, they're aware. It's definitely the residents. You're right.
I think the shaming is called giving people a speeding ticket. And I mean,
You mean
I'm telling you,
accountability?
that's what it is.
Cuomo- Isn't that what
where I
Cuomo-
grew up-
Cuomo said?
Well, where
Cuomo
I grew up,
said you
people
can
got
have-
tickets
you-
all the time.
I spoke
Cuomo
to
said
Lieutenant
You
Deruza.
can have out.
Oh, wait.
You can,
Folks, we got
Cuomo
a report
said-
right here from the PD.
right. Go ahead.
The
Go.
speed sign was moved because of the school. They wanted them in the school zones with the start of the school year.
Right.
She's
Yeah,
going to discuss
yeah.
with the chief about moving them back there.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
okay.
Great,
Guys,
thank you.
I've got to hop off. I've got something else at 8, but thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye,
Alana.
Lana.
So Shannon, just to remind you, that's exactly why we asked them to put the speed monitoring thing back there, but to turn off the light so that we
Right.
can see how the people are behaving when they don't realize that we're recording.
Right.
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 Right. No, absolutely. And so, I mean, if the speed trailer can be placed there, even just for a week with the lights off, to collect that data, I think that would be helpful in the coming month. And Alana's right. I mean, the the best marketing for traffic safety is bad marketing, you know, because when you're
Right.
sitting around the dinner table at night and you just got a speeding citation or a distracted driving citation, you feel like an idiot, right? And you're going to tell the
Yes.
story, and probably you're going to paint yourself in rose-colored glasses and be like, I don't know what he was thinking pulling me over. But you know, facts. I mean, that is the best marketing we have. Unfortunately, there are screamingly few traffic safety officers. And if we really had the resources to put enforcement out on every single local roadway where people speed, forget it. We'd have a police force of how large, Dan? I mean, like, you know, like,
Right. That's very true.
you know, it's, and until and unless, you know, the states gets on board with automated enforcement, which, you know, they're very comfortable with Easy Pass, but automated enforcement, no way, man. Big Brother's watching me.
Yeah, but Big Brother has been watching. It's already happened. So guess what? They have no problem. They have no problem billing you when you're coming in and out of the city or in and out of New Rochelle on not, you know, I-95. But it's already part of our culture. So I find that is no real reason is behind this. They can't say that it does exist. We live with it. You know what? There's pros and cons to that. But ultimately, it serves a purpose, and the purpose works. It's revenue. It helps the community.
And you're preaching to the choir,
I don't know.
Karen. And honestly, preaching to the choir. I think the
I know. I'm
more
preaching the converted.
the more that we can, again, you know, just amongst ourselves and amongst our neighbors and kind of grow that education, the more voices that do not accept dangerous driving behavior on our local roadways, the more we're going to be able to drown out those few residents that want to take that risk. And, you know, whether it's shaming them or ticketing them or, you know, just taking videos of them. I mean, for God's sakes, you know, like it's
Well, the
probably
last time that I actually threatened to video someone who was blowing stop signs that are near Berry and the Parkway in Shore Acres, the man got out of his car, came after me, and threatened my life.
Oh my God.
That happened a month ago. I mean, like, I basically honked the horn and I said, you know, that's a stop sign. And he threatened my life.
You just would never even think of it as.
Well,
Oh, somebody's unmuted.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. I
Well,
just feel
so it
free-
sounds like, yeah, we've got a plan for, you know, getting the speed trailer back out there with the lights out.
I think police presence has to be there. We have a lot of tax dollars that are going out there in the Baronic for our great schools as well as our police force. I just think, you know, I understand that they go where they're needed by pay grade. I don't know.
Oh,
You know, I see them driving here and there, but I don't see them driving during the top speed hours. I just don't. And I will call them every now and then and let them know. But during the times of day, which is usually around the times moms are driving or dad kids to school, pickups where I see a lot of speeding.
Yeah.
I don't see the.
Oh, Karen's cutting out. Well, listen, folks, I know we've just got one last little old business thing to check up on, and then we can call it quits for the evening. And that is the Orienta Avenue four-way stop. Last meeting says four-way stop discussed. Dan to get crash report from police or incident report from police. Add to October's agenda. Which intersection was this, Dan? Do you remember?
I think that this was a request for a stop sign down at Orienta and Bleecker. Is that right? Does that ring a bell to anyone?
Larry, you're muted.
Yeah, it's the intersection of Grecian Point Road, Bleecker, and Orienta.
Yeah.
Grecian Point has a stop sign already.
Okay.
Out of Grecian Point.
So the Orienta has the right of way.
Right. And so there's not a stop at Grecian Point. It's at Cove Road.
Yes.
And then Bleecker is, you know, a couple blocks farther. And so stopping coming on to Orienta, but I think the request was for a stop on Orienta.
On Orient.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
that's what it was.
Cars stop-
Right.
I thought I put the request in, I can't recall though. I'll check.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan.
I'm sorry, what is he gonna do?
I
Dan's,
thought I put the request in for the traffic, or the crash data for,
Police data.
for
Yep. for that intersection.
that
Yep.
intersection. I said,
Do you call it police data or crash data?
well, I mean, so
Either one.
it's police
Either one,
data, but
okay.
what I would look at is crash
Crash
data.
or citations.
Okay,
Yeah.
all
I
right.
would- Again, what I look at is the warrant for creating an all-way stop is the, certain amount of accidents in a 12-month period.
Crashes.
And that's kind of the first trigger.
So
Okay.
we are coming to the near of the end of our lovely time together this month, my friends. But one of the things that I just wanted to point out really quick, as a plug for our up and coming educational seminar, you probably have noticed in a lot of our incident reports, in a lot of the requests that we get from residents and things like that, what's the recurring thing that they all are asking for safety? Everybody wants a stop sign. A stop sign is definitely going to make things safer. And I'll give you a little spoiler alert. That ain't the case. If we fill the villages with stop signs, people will come to ignore them. They really are traffic control devices that need to be placed under a very specific set of circumstances. And, you have a long straight road where there's 5 stop signs in a row. I promise you, the human behavior model doesn't follow it, and so, part of this is just us better understanding kind of what traffic engineers have evolved to adopt in recent decades. So I really am excited about sharing this seminar. I'm excited about what it's going to do for our deliberations on these meetings, because I think it'll help sort of speed some of our internal decision making, but also the kind of feedback that we can valuably give to residents and come up with innovative and creative solutions that actually are going to create behavioral change. So just wanted to give that little YouTube movie alert teaser.
Thanks, Shannon.
And I've written that letter more times than you could even imagine about the stop signs. I mean, people are back up to speed in 150 feet. If drivers feel as if they're being slowed down, their reaction is to drive faster to pick up the time they think they need.
I'll tell you the other thing that happens, and I'm sure Shannon's report will bear this out, and anyone who doubts it can come stand on Cove Road in Orienta, because we're expecting cars to stop. And so leaving Cove Road, there are stop signs there. People on Orienta should be stopping. They don't. And so expecting them to stop, people leave Cove Road. And I have seen so many near tragedies with pedestrians, with dog walkers, with joggers, with strollers, with cars. You can't believe it. It becomes a horrifying situation.
I can believe it.
Yeah. It's unreal.
There's a lot of disregard in this community for stuff.
So then what's the answer? What's the answer?
Depends. It really does. It depends on the roadway.
Tickets the answer.
Sometimes it's enforcement.
Right, but
sometimes
I don't think we have the enforcement to put at every
right. That's right.
intersection. So I mean,
And that's why I said before, a lot of traffic safety concepts, engineering concepts, they're more psychological as opposed to physical.
Right.
It's
a bit more nuanced.
When the driver when the driver observes things which make them feel that they can't go as fast as they can, then that's when they typically adjust their behavior. It really is, I wouldn't even say it's 50-50 physical to psychological. I think it's about 90-10 psychological to physical. That's just my thought after you know,
No, that's
uh,
that thought is borne out by research, Dan. We know that 94% of all collisions are caused by human error. It's not bad guardrails. It's not bad guardrails or an absence. I'm going to give you all a recommendation for a book. If you're interested in learning about a little bit about the psychology behind why we drive the way we do, it's called Traffic by Tom Vanderbilt. And Karen, you'll appreciate this because he does a lot of discourse on the European village model. But it is an excellent, it's audiobook. I'm looking at it right now. Audible.com is $23. That's not so cheap, but
The title's Traffic.
Traffic.
Okay,
Traffic.
I can remember that.
Why we drive the way we do.
How is Vanderbilt spelled?
Vanderbilt.
You know, I've had occasion to read a number of traffic reports in my day, and as sad as they are, it's incredible how foolish people are when and you'll read some of these things, and it's just it blows your mind as to how careless people can be behind the wheel of a vehicle.
Part of it. Look, we've come such a long way in making people inside the car safe, right? We've got 12 airbags. We've got auto brake detection. The car corrects you when you drift out of the lane. It brakes for you when you get too close to the. So we've created this false feeling of total impermeability and total security, and I can do whatever that I want behind the wheel because the car is going to take care of me, right?
Yeah.
Well, it comes full circle back to what I said originally, which is an entitlement issue. This is an issue
It's a
of
class
people
issue.
feeling entitled to do it, and until you are nailed to the point where it hurts. Some people don't learn by just doing the right thing. That's a personality type. There's a lot of people in this community I've noticed, because I'll be honest, I'm from the Midwest. Not that we're impervious to this, but this is a trend on the East Coast specifically. And this is something that is documented. There's an entitlement issue. There's a rushing issue. There is just an aggression here that there's a lot of entitlement. There's a lack of space, and there's a lot more traffic, maybe, so they feel they have to hurry up to get to where they need to be. So they're going to dismiss the laws and the rules that the rest of us are supposed to be following.
Not to get off tangent even further, but one word, jaywalking.
Oh.
That's
so
funny.
We're gonna leave it there because my agency
leave
just
it
had
there,
a Twitter roast today. So
let's move on, guys.
right.
We
And
can
then
go on
actually,
okay.
we
can
are
go on
actually at the end of our agenda for this month.
Okay,
and this evening,
one thing on other. Dan, did you ever look into what's going on with this other with that Grint?
Remus?
I believe that was more about the turning movements going from Post onto Fenimore. It wasn't really about the amount of time that was on the signal or a sync issue.
The request is for an all pedestrian stop.
Yeah, and it's the state.
So what's going on with this?
I think the state said they weren't inclined to do that, but I think they were inclined to allow for or prohibit the right-hand turning movement from
which is
the right-hand red from Post onto Fenimore.
Interesting, because the next major intersections along the BPR have all pedestrian signals.
I'm not sure that. No, I don't think. I'm not sure that Orienta has.
No, not Orienta, but Rich Bell and BPR and Mamaroneck Avenue and BPR, and so it can be done.
Yeah.
And given that is a fairly significant entry point for pedestrians into Harbor Island Park, I mean, I'm not challenging what the state is saying in terms of like what their priorities might be, but I'm challenging the fact that they can do it, So
Dan, this has been on. Dan, this has been on for months. So what can we do to either get this taken care of, or should we just take it off? It can't be done, or
Well, I
What do
mean,
you-
it's the state's intersection. The state from what I recall seeing the emails, the state is willing to allow for the prohibition of the right-hand turning movement from West Boston Post Road onto Fenimore. I think that was the limit to what they were going to do. I don't know if you want to.
Would you mind forwarding me that email exchange,
Yeah,
Dan?
I'll look for it and I'll send it to you.
Okay, that'd be
And
great.
Dan?
You can also, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I don't think that's the pedestrian problem, though, of people turning from Post Road on
Right.
right onto Fenimore. I think it's people going from
you just got
Fenimore
muted.
onto the Post Road.
Right.
Okay, then it might have been that.
Okay.
I'll check the email, but.
It's the crosswalk and the traffic light are not
Yeah.
in sync on Fenimore and Boston Post Road. No turn on red to the Post Road to stop all the traffic for a minute, couple of minutes or seconds.
Yeah.
That's all.
Right. And
Yeah,
right on
that was
either
part of the
side.
problem. When I originally saw this, I wasn't aware of what because it just said, something, it said not synced. I didn't know what that meant. But now my recollection is, like you mentioned, it's prohibiting the right-hand turning movement from Fenimore
Right.
onto
But
the.
since we now know that Fenimore is a village road, can we just do that? Do we have to
No,
involve the
I
state?
think, well, it's.
It's the fact that it
yeah,
intersects with
It's the state intersection.
All
Now,
right.
what we could always do, and if you want to elevate this to a higher level, we could ask, Assemblyman Otis or State Senator Mayer to speak to the DOT on our behalf.
I think that might
we
go.
did that in the past when we talked about the getting the school zone set up by the high school.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think
George carried our water for us when he was the assemblyman. He carried the water for us again when he was state senator.
So, but I think that there's two problems there. Number one is that there is not enough time for the pedestrians to get across because of the way it's set up. And number two, with the right-hand turns, is that the pedestrians are getting a walk sign to cross across.
At the same time,
they-
the cars are
fence,
turning into them.
and the cars are making the right-hand turn on red from the post road onto Fenimore, and so it's dangerous. Those are the two issues.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the timing, my recollection, the average adult human being ambulates at 4 feet per second. For senior citizen and children, they ambulate at 3 feet per second.
Right.
And so the timing should really be based on the length of the crossing multiplied with a certain addition for the average person who's crossing the street, or if it's the senior or child in that case.
Absolutely. No, forward me that email exchange, Dan. That'd be great.
Yeah, I will.
Cool.
All right, I'm gonna leave it on, and Dan, you're gonna look into it?
Yep.
Okay,
And I
great.
think we lost Larry, so I'm not even sure that we have a quorum anymore. But at this point, we are literally at the end of our agenda, gang. So
Okay, wait, on the just one thing, on the follow-up stuff. Elena is meeting with Jerry tomorrow and should have an answer for us on all the follow-up stuff by
Yeah, I
him.
think we have a conference call tomorrow, Kelly.
Yeah.
perfect.
We do,
Perfect.
yeah.
Yeah,
And that's it.
11 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
But we have to do the minutes.
Well, technically,
Oh.
I think
We don't have a quorum.
yeah, by the
We don't
lack
have a quorum.
of a quorum, you are adjourned.
Oh. Exactly. We just got adjourned when Larry walked out the door.
You're muted, John.
What happened?
No,
Larry
Kelly-
walked out.
Well, Kelly is muted. I think she was trying to say something.
You're muted.
So what do we do about closing? in
Gal,
the
we
minutes?
can't hear you, Kelly.
Dan,
What
can
do,
you just send me information about that conference call tomorrow? It's not on my calendar, so I
thought
don't.
I thought there was something that we have a meeting at 11. I don't know if that was you or just Elena.
I don't know.
Okay,
It's
I'll
not on my
check.
calendar for tomorrow, but if you
I'll-
see it, would you give me a heads up? Thanks.
Yeah, let me look at my calendar now.
so we cannot do the minutes or close
No,
the
you
meeting?
can't
with
take any
just-
further action.
Can't make
All
it.
right.
Can't do
so
the
I-
minutes, but the
Next
meeting is done.
Right.
You've been adjourned by fate.
By what?
By
Hi,
fate.
Larry.
Okay. Larry, where the heck did he go? Okay.
He wandered away. What can we
We'll
say?
have to do the minutes next month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all so very much as always.
He's
Thank
gonna
you.
say,
You.
spend too much time on this traffic stuff, guys. That's what he's gonna say.
Yeah, right? This whole traffic commission has traffic stuff.
Too much. All right, bye.
Bye, gang.
Did you see anything on your calendar, Dan?
No, I didn't. Maybe I had it wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think it might just be a different day.
Yep, okay.
Okay, thank you. Good night.